one mistake you think people make when they set goals?
They set their goals to achieve, and goals aren't achieving. That's not the outcome. The goal is merely a direction finder. It's your North Star. It's where you want to go. Technically, you should never reach your goal. You should always be growing. The secret of everything you do, from your purpose through into your life, should be the journey from here to there and the growth that you get within it. But if your goal is set out as a purpose-driven series of journey, then you cannot fail. You cannot lose. You're a winner all the way.
Because the journey is the goal.
Because your journey is the goal.
Let's just go and see the world and just show them what it really means to live life golden. Yeah, we're golden, baby girl, we're golden.
Kevin Ellis, welcome to the podcast.
Nice to be here.
I would do my best to give you an introduction, but I don't think I'd do it justice. So, for anyone listening, Kev is my stepfather. He's someone who's had a tremendous impact on me as a person. And helped me, develop and definitely come a long way over the years. But as I was saying, you've got a lot of experience in a lot of different areas. So what I'll get you to do is give yourself a bit of an introduction, and we can kind of dive into your backstory and your experience and a little bit, into your journey as well.
Okay. So, Kevin Ellis. I migrated to Australia in 2012 from the United Kingdom. I have set up a small consultancy come training, mentoring, coaching company, and I've been working all over Australia, really, working in government areas predominantly, looking at setting up specialist units, specialist teams, dealing with the levels and putting in strategies to deal with levels of violence and issues that are going on in various different areas, from communities to prisons, youth justice, to remote communities, where they have their particular issues and problems. I'm particularly interested in the society as general, and just the way it's turning, the changes that you're starting to see. I'm very conscious of the impact that has on every element of life, and personally, I do have some concerns in relation to that sort of thing. But to get me to the stage of where I was able to even do that sort of stuff, I go back to pre-2012, where I served in the British Army, serving in all various sort of, postings, and including Northern Ireland, which at that time was a very active service deployment. Leaving the Army, I served in the police and did 30 years there, which culminated in me dealing with mainly the higher risk elements of the job. I was in the riot teams, I was in all the tactical firearms teams, and then eventually I became the trainer of those organizations, and culminating in being seconded in 2005 to the National Police Improvement Agency, which was a sort of a center of excellence, where I was sent all over the world, really, looking at problems and areas and issues, and I would be working with the teams to provide solutions. I also was a national advisor and run courses for the very senior commanders to become accredited in running public order events, running football matches, running large-scale music events, and that wasn't by rank. That was just by proxy of the role I was doing at the time. And then I was an independent member of the Expert Witness Institute, which meant that at certain times, at critical times, maybe a death had occurred and a police officer was involved, I would be called in to provide evidence to all the courts and the coroner's courts in relation to that sort of incident. And there was a small group of people that tended to be called in. It wasn't formal. It was either you were called in and asked to provide that bit of evidence. And I did that on probably over 100 occasions, providing that evidence.
Yeah. I think the thing that is I mean, obviously myself and you, we have a close relationship, but over the time you've seen yourself develop and you've developed yourself, and you've got obviously a passion for the mind, and that's something that you've had for years upon years upon years. So I guess, how have you seen yourself develop across the journey, and obviously the things that you've learned and the things that you've incorporated? What's your journey, through self-development and obviously stemming from, someone, obviously the whole journey through life from obviously a child to, a teen to, developing beyond that to the point where you're at now. And what are some of the, I guess not the key lessons, but what are some of the experiences that have molded you and some of the things that, maybe some of the key concepts that you've seen mold you across the journey?
Well, as a kid, I grew up in a variety of different housing estates that were considered high crime, high problems. There was socioeconomical problems there. I had addictions in the family. I had processes where I was, looked at through the services, the school services, for my life, the life I was leading, and et cetera, et cetera. I hung out with people who, at that time, were good friends of mine, but took a route which, they decided they wanted to take, which led to them ending up where they've ended up. And even at a young age, I'm talking 9, 10, I knew that wasn't where I was gonna stay. And I didn't know the how, but I certainly knew the why. I was not going to remain, because, as I've said, and I've said it a million times, 95% of the people you hang around with, the influence that people have on you, of the environment you are in, is massive. So I would say to everybody, you look at your environment first. What is this doing for me? If I'm missing work every single day because I'm getting up late, because I've been out partying every night, the environment is not doing you well, especially if that job is a job you really enjoy or you want to progress in. Mm-hmm. So that was a big thing for me. So I started to look at it, but I didn't understand. Do you know what I'm saying? I did not understand how somebody like me, who had no shoes, who had no, holes in my shoes, I turned up on sports day to do the 60-meter sprint in jeans. I turned up in what I was wearing to school that day. And I did and I won. Now you're looking at me, you're saying, you liar. I won. Yeah, I won that 60-meter sprint, mate. And in the school assembly, we got the little certificate, and off I went. I thought, oh. But that was the story of my life. I had no uniform. Everyone had a uniform. I never had a uniform. And I would fight anyone who would take the Mickey or Mick or me because I was a little bit different. I never considered myself anything other than a very quiet kid. I've listened to mates of mine who I've known all the way back from them days, and they say, you never weren't quiet, mate. But you weren't a fighter. You weren't somebody who'd go out looking for trouble or anything like that. So I grew up very much aware of where I was from. I was also very much aware that wasn't where I was going to stay, but I didn't know how to get out of it. And then I had a really remarkable thing, because they moved me to another school. And they put me to the school. I ended up in the high school, what was their high school. And I went to this school, and it was all sport. It was a brand new school. Mm. And they'd moved a lot of problem kids into this school, and it was just sport. Now, I had a background in rugby, but I'd never progressed it because I didn't have the logistics. Like, we had to take it in turns to take the kids to the away games. I didn't have a car. My father didn't have a car. We didn't have a phone. We didn't have a television. So to take kids to the away games, I couldn't fulfill my part of that equation. So unless somebody offered to take me, which they did 90% of the time, I couldn't, and I was very conscious of the fact I couldn't do that. So I suddenly discovered, and there was a teacher there, a particular teacher, who come up to me and said to me, and this was way before he was really influential in my life, but he got into me then. And his name was Dennis Ellis, and he's the same name, but no relation to me. And he said to me, he says, you're a good rugby player. That's what he said. You're a good rugby player. And we were playing basketball at that day in school. We're just playing a bit of basketball when I was, And he says, well, you got a bit of skill, son. He says, come over here. He says, where are you from? I said, the other estate, which is where he lived. And he said to me, so you play rugby? I said, yes. He says, I phoned the school. You're a good rugby player. He said, I want you in our team. Now, we're forming a new team. This is like a brand new school, forming a new team. And I said, oh, okay. I said, I'm going to need boots. He says, well, what size are you? Blah, blah, blah. So I got a pair of boots from the lost property, and I started to play rugby. And I played for him, and we won the whole Premier League that year, the first year. And I was established with him. And then every year, he took us all the way through to the final year, and we won just about everything in Cardiff, which is, Wales at that time was a rugby nation. I mean, it still is, but then they were producing it on the field at national and international level. So it was a big thing. So I did that. And then all of a sudden, I decided, now I've got to get away. How am I going to get away? Where does someone like me go to get away? So I knew that something like me, I needed to join the army. That was, somebody said to me, have you thought of the army? And I thought, no, I haven't, I was never going to be a Boy Scout. I was never going to be a cadet. I was going the army. And he said, all right, you can do that, but, you've got to have qualifications. You've got to pass an exam. And I wasn't really doing school then at that stage. And, I was going for sport, not going for other things. And I said, okay, so I said, I need to get away, and I need to give myself a space where I can get myself prepared for it. So I went and moved in with what was an auntie, miles away, other side of the city. And she sat there, and she wouldn't have nothing. She's my father's sister, but she wouldn't have any messing about, It was this, you be on me at this time, this is dinner, this is what you do, this is where you go, and if you're staying with me, this is the world it's going to be. And I said, all right. And at the time, it's easy to say all right when you don't know what all right means, And I was there, and she was as strict as you could get, true to a word. And I suddenly realized, I had to make my bed, I had to do these things, and I suddenly realized all this. And then she started to say to me, okay, you need to start doing something now in the evenings. And I said, okay. So she goes, I want you to read these books. So she gave me some books to read. And that was it. I was like, boo. Now, I couldn't have moved to her because I couldn't have got 3 buses each way, unless Dennis Ellis, as it happened, lived in the same estate as her, offered to give me a lift in every morning and a lift every night. And I'm like, why would you do this? Why would you do it? My father was brilliant. My father was a great hard worker guy, down in the docks, really hard worker. My mother, God bless her, everyone tried their best to do what they did. I cannot qualm about them. They give me the character that I feel I've taken on through my life. That was a blessing for me. But this guy took me in and out, and he said to me, if you're not outside of the school 4:30, I'm leaving you, I'm gone, and I'll only ever do that once. So I had these people instilling little rules into me that I'd never had before, that I found quite useful. It certainly paid off, but they were useful. So that was where I sort of got that thing. And then at 16, I walked myself down to the Army Careers Office, signed up, basically a little bit of thing, whether I went in the Marines, went in the Army.
Before you did that, right? So you obviously talked a little bit about, as a 9-year-old or as a 10-year-old, and you had friends that you were with, and they went down one path, and you decided that you didn't want to do that. But I mean, you think about it, and like I think about 9 and 10-year-olds, and I was going to ask a different question, but I guess the question now is that you obviously talked about how things weren't perfect growing up, right? But you also talked about the fact that you had people around you that instilled character into you. Do you think that played a big part into that decision, or just that awareness as a child, to be able to sit there and go, okay, well, that's not what I want to do. That's not what they're not my values, right? So
yeah, people didn't use words then. I mean, it was like you sit there and you suddenly decide at 10 that I'm not going to go out tonight with this group of guys. I know what they're going to do. I ain't going with them. To make that decision alienates you to a certain extent. So you've got to have character to stand that down, because they'll come after you, because they're always looking for somebody who's slightly different, who doesn't conform to their way, because their power base is around conformity to everyone doing what they want to do. And one person in particular, who was the leader really, was doing all that. And I wasn't having a part of it. That's not me. And I was 10, and these guys were 12, 13, 14. And I had fights with them. As a 10-year-old fighting a 13-year-old, I got mangled, man.
Oh, it's a big thing, yeah.
And I was beaten regularly in that sort of thing because I didn't conform. But what it made me do was it made me realize even more. It solidified my resolve to know that was not the right way. Because if they're beating me at 10, what are they going to do at 15, 16? I'll have a knife in my back. I'll have this. It was a totally different game. So I decided, now I'd never committed a criminal offense. I'm telling you that now. I didn't go out shoplifting. I didn't go out do any of all that stuff. They'd go out and do what they do, right? And I was with them. The moment they said to me, right, we're off, come on, we're going to do that, I wasn't having it. Even then, I wasn't having it. I would not be pulled along like a lapdog. And in the army, when I went in the army, and I know I jumped slightly, but when I was in the army, they used to have a break from drill, and it used to be a smoke break, right? And you had 80 people on the drill square, and they say, right, smoke break, 5 minutes. Everyone would run over to the corner of the building to smoke. I never smoked. I've never smoked in my life. I went to the other side of the building. And I was getting a mickey taken out of them. I was getting all sorts of things. There were kids who'd never smoked, who went in the army and started to smoke so they could go to that side of the building. And I was like, what? So I was having none of it. So I was over there, and I got earache and all that from that. But it didn't bother me. It just went right over my head because I knew that there was a greater purpose there. I knew why I was there. And going back to being 10, 12, 13, 14, I didn't know how, but I knew there was a why, and it wasn't to stay where I was staying. As simple as that, really. My family, brilliant. Me and my sister are so close. Me and my brother are really, really, really close. Still to this day. But I put no blame on anyone in my family. They did what they could do with the circumstances they had at the time. But there were things that went on, and that was out of their control.
Do you think, because that's obviously the hardest thing to do, to not conform, right? Like, I think I look back to some of my experiences, and it was the same thing. And I actually did conform, for a long time, but to my own detriment. And only once I had decided to have the courage not to conform, did I actually start to be happy, to feel like I'm progressing, to feel like I'm actually making progress. And that's honestly what I look at as probably one of the most important things. People don't necessarily need to progress. They will need to feel like they're progressing, and because that's what gives you the confidence. And confidence is what someone needs in order to actually put themselves out there. And it's hard because, the first couple of times you don't conform, it's almost a mini identity crisis. I'm over here, they're laughing at me. Am I doing something wrong? And then as time goes by, you kind of realize, well, no, like if I want to achieve this, I can't just go away and do this. And I think, obviously that's one of the toughest things to do, is to not just go with the flow, to not just,
I've taught leadership at the high level. I've taught leadership at operational levels. I've taught leadership in all various different folds. And the one thing I say, forget about your job, forget about your role, forget about everything else. Leadership doesn't come with rank or responsibility. It comes with you as a person. As a person, you have to find the elements that sit within you that you can instill in somebody else. Even if it's a brand new person in your organization, even if you're meeting somebody in the back of the street who's struggling a bit in life and going through a bit of a crisis, you are not advising them of what to do. You are leading them through a problem. You start giving people advice, you are taking on the problem. And if it doesn't go right, you are technically responsible because you've given them that advice. The thing to do in any situation is to give them the support mechanism to work it out themselves. Me and you have had numerous chats down the years about numerous things. Now the good thing is our chats are social over a glass of wine and a meal. But they've all been the same way. But my view is very, very simple. You're not here to tell you how to do something. That's never been my role in any of the roles I've had, even rank in the army. When I was dealing with problem people, even then, they seemed to put the problem people to me. I just seemed to be the one that attracted them. And that was never my ethos, was to say, right, what is your problem? I'm going to fix you. My problem was, how can I support you to make the decision that you need to make to get yourself to point B? Because you're at point A and you're sinking,
It's so interesting. Like I think about this from a business perspective, and as a leader, it's very easy to get caught into a place, and I've probably made this mistake a few times now, but one thing I am realizing is when you bring someone into your organization, that's got to be the mindset. I'm going to provide the support system for you to do your best work and to feel like you can do that work. But if I take that away from you, it's almost like a ticking time bomb, right? If I take that away from you and you just feel like you're, working for the sake of working, and I remove that passion and that creativity, and don't provide that support system around you so that you can do your best work, and just be there as simply a guide, the relationship is not going to work. And if the relationship doesn't work and that trust isn't there, then the system as a whole has a weak link, has a breakdown. And that's something from a business perspective I've constantly have to fight with myself about. I think any leader does, is like, what's that line, and that flirtatious line of being able to simply provide that network, and how do I actually give this person feedback? How do I actually provide that feedback? Because there's a way I want to do it, or there's a way that I think it's best, but that might not be that best way for that person.
No, and that's an interesting one, because I put a great deal of emphasis. One of my roles I had was I was the professional development manager. After I'd retired, they kept me on as the professional development manager for the police. So basically I had ownership of the recruits coming in to the organization and to get them street ready. That was it. They went through the academy. I had nothing to do with that. But then I had them in one of my 60 sergeants, and I had 16 sergeants, 50-odd shooters, all operational police officers, and these people would come in, they'd be attached to these people and they'd go out on the street and learn the trade of all the academy stuff that they learned in theory to be put into the practice with a very seasoned cop. Now, my role there was, there was absolutely, I had absolutely no qualms in saying to somebody, I think you're in the wrong job. You've got to prove to me that you're not. I didn't say you're in the wrong job and I'm going to sack you if you get it wrong. I'm saying you are looking into this work and the way you are approaching these operational situations in a way which is not congruent with that of somebody who wants to stay safe. And your partner is not going to be safe. So I want you to look at that and prove me wrong. Because I'm looking at that now and I'm saying, this isn't going to end well. And I'm not waiting for it to end badly before we make a move on you. And the amount of people who would come in to sit me, and said, oh my God, this is what's happening. What can I do differently? Stop being a person who wants to be liked by everybody and go out there and serve the public by doing your role as it's supposed to be done. By definition, you're going to upset people or you're going to say things people don't want to hear. But if you're doing it to the best of your purpose, to the service, then they will understand the reason it's going done. You'd have people who you arrested and brought them in, and they knew they were never going to go out again. They were going to be in prison for the rest of their lives. But they talk to you because you treat them as if they were human, regardless of, you don't treat, you're hard on the criminal, you're hard on the crime, the actual offense. You're soft on the criminal because you need them to give you the information. You need to solve that crime. You need to stop it happening again. So you can't be all tied up emotionally in it. And these young people come in with a view of, I want to change the world. Everyone's a victim. Well, no, they're not. There are victims, there are survivors, there's manipulators, there's very aggressive and angry people, and there are people who want to hurt you. Your job, by understanding, this is where the mind is, by understanding how to use the mind in every situation, is to create a holistic approach to everything. Somebody tells you that they're the victim of a crime, so what else could this mean? And there's a million ways of dealing with that. And I started to see that we were bringing people through the academy so politically correct. They'd lost life's knowledge. They hadn't got it. A lot of these kids were middle-class kids, hadn't been in any situation. They hadn't got it. So they were coming out and they were going out on the streets and they were finding that life is hard. It's dirty, it's hard, and it's tough. And to stop a cop going down that road and being as hard and as tough and as dirty as they are, the police have got to be in a group, community, where the system works. They're supported. You know, they got all those things in place. And I gained that from the Army, that understanding that it's a team, no one person. Doesn't matter what unit you're in, no one person is the answer to that team's problems. You are a cog in that wheel, and you either solidify the movement forward, or you break down and you have a temporary roadside breakdown where it needs to be repaired and fixed. And often that means that person isn't congruent with the feelings and the way the other people work, and that needs to be sorted out. You know, and I find if you take that concept, you put it into mindset and everything else, I know we're going to be talking about all sorts of different things, and you apply it to business, you apply it to anything, then what you've got is you've got an understanding straight away of what your business stands for. What is its soul? What is its purpose?
Yeah, and it's so interesting, right? Like, you know, we're coming back to that word leadership, but we had Al Roseby on, and she said that, you know, a big part of her job is to, you know, like you said, make people feel supported, but to make sure that the organization as a whole her role is to instill the values and make sure that she holds up those values and manages those values across the company. And she said that as a leader, you need to, first of all, fill your own cup and work on yourself, so that when you're faced with situations when you have to have that conversation with somebody who may not be congruent with everybody else or may not be living and breathing those values, you can have that conversation. And that's kind of like how, you know, I look at it that way, right? It's like, okay, well, we stand for something as a company. It's not just words on a wall. We have these values. You're not holding these values up. Why is that? Is everything okay at home? Is, you know, and so on, and go and again adds that support network, and instead of talking at the person, tries to find out what's the problem, you know, what, like, and how, you know, and like what you mentioned before, you know, how can we, you know, how come, you know, you've and then, you know, the other thing that she said was, okay, well this is the bus and the bus is leaving. You've got a choice to be on that bus, but it's leaving. So you can either choose to be on the bus and come with us, or you can choose to be off the bus. But that's your choice. And that's something that's stuck with me, but, you know, there's an overlay here, right, that I'm hearing, and that's how my brain works. What's the patterns that we're seeing? And that's the pattern that I picked up with what you just said then. And it's funny because, you know, two walks of life, right? You know, you're coming from an army background, you're coming from, you know, police force background and that side of things, and Al's coming, you know, from a background where she's had, you know, been in business, and she's had great leaders that have led her, and she takes those lessons and so on. So I find that really, really interesting.
And it's what you've just said then is really, really important. A lot of people don't take stock on it. I'm looking back as a 61-year-old man over 45 years of active frontline type service, and then the consultancy where I'm looking at it from a different perspective, but it's still the same. I'm dealing with the same issues. And one of the things I do when I look back on that is I am still following key things, key people in my life taught me. I'm going right back to my very first sergeant in the Army as a 16-year-old. You know what I mean? When he pushed me against the wall and said to me, listen, son, you're not bigger than this. You know, if you come in here and try and fight the system will crush you. But you've got something. That's all he said. You've got something. We're going to find it and we're going to take it out. And you've just got to follow the rules. And then eventually you will understand that the rules are actually to your benefit. If at stage you find they're not, you leave. Because this isn't the environment for you. That was it for me. The same as the teacher, Dennis Ellis, said, son, I will take you there, I'll take you here, I'll take you anywhere you want to go because I believe in you. The moment you let me down, I won't be there. And I'm giving you that one chance. So all those little things, and then going back through the police, all the different things I did, I had key people around me who said key things to me, which kept me there. And I just felt I'm learning so much, you know. What am I going to do with all this learning? How am I going to do it? And the first thing is I said, I've got to put it inwards. I've got to take it from all over these different places I talked to you about in the 70s, I went on a retreat. I went off and I did martial arts and then to Paul Mountains, and then stayed there and did a silent retreat. I went off and I've done courses all over the world. I've canoed the Amazon. I was throwing a bloody, just crazy. Hitchhiked through Africa and got stabbed and all this. So I've had all these different little adventures, and every single one of them sit there and have taught me something that I have kept, because they were valuable to me at the moment, at the time, and they're even more valuable to me now when I look back. Because I honestly believe that the 4 or 5, and everyone said, people come in their lives and make a difference. There are only ever going to be 4 or 5 people who make that big difference, and they're at key times. And they may only say a sentence to you, but they're key times. And if you keep them and you think, that's worked well for me at that moment, it will work well for you for the rest of life. You may have to modify it. You may have to tweak it because you grow in and your context is different. But the value of it will be really important. And I sit there and I said to I've said it to everybody, but I've said it to a lot of people recently who I've been up to deal with in training programs. And I've sat there and I've said, if we're going to be talking about leadership, this is not a rank conversation. You're all leaders to me. I don't get paid to be a leader. You are all leaders or you're in the wrong course. Just get out the door. And I take that in all walks of life. I've said it a million times. As a parent, you've got to lead. By definition, you better lead. And as a sports person, you go off and you join a club. You have the onus and responsibility to contribute to that club. They don't technically owe you anything. They are providing you with the opportunity for you to do a sport, to play a game, and to do these things, and to grow in that element of your life. Even when I go to the gym, I go there with the concept of, am I going to contribute to this process? Now, I'm not dealing with the people in there. I'm not the trainer or anything like that. But I go in there thinking, if I have a conversation with somebody, I get the best out of that conversation. And I'll say to somebody, because I ain't standing there like a bodybuilder, am I? I stand there and I look at this one person. I say, mate, what have you done there? He said, I do this, I do that. And I just spend 10 minutes with that person. I've walked away feeling I know something now. He's walked away as if that guy's all right. No problem with that. But I don't lock myself away. I'm always there trying to learn and contribute to something,
So one thing I wanted to ask, right, is that you talked about you've got life experience, right? Real life experience from things that you've gone out and done on your own bat, like you said, obviously the Amazon and these kind of things. You've also got experience that you've experienced through your career and these kind of things. And I honestly think that's something that a lot of people can miss, right? And we've talked about this before, but the word of fear, right? And how the role and how we are in a society at the moment where there's so much distraction. There's the news is it can be horrible at times, right? Because there's continuous fear-mongering news in a sense, and in my opinion, that stops a lot of people. There's the fear of judgment. There's the fear of just, the world in general, of not doing these things. What are some of the things that you would say to someone around, if they are fearful, if they're not doing things that they're passionate about, if they're not curious, if they're not looking to go out and learn, and maybe fear is the thing that's stopping them? Is there anything that you can add there?
Well, I think we've had a brief conversation prior to this, and one of the things I would say is that fear sits behind just about everything that people are not doing, and it also sits behind a lot of the things of why people do certain things. Do you know what I mean? So you can have fear of success which could be as debilitating to you as a fear of failure, and I've always felt I've never wanted to be at the top. I've never wanted to be above the radar. That doesn't sit with me at all. It just doesn't sit with me. But is that, if I look at it, if I go into myself and say, actually, just do a bit of work on that, is that what's the reason for that? Is that because you don't feel you're good enough, or you're not worthy? Or if you do get up there, people are going to blow you off, knock you off and everything else. Social media being what it is, I mean, you get one comment, you get a million bad comments. I've never been in that world. So do I want to be in it? And I've always said, don't want to be in it. Not because I'm frightened of it, but because I've never experienced it. and did it. But I have to look back at myself at that sometimes and take a deep hard look at myself and say, well, is that something that I could work on? You know? Is that something that maybe that's one of my areas? So anyone who says to me, oh, you know what, I wanted to join the army, but the moment they get that but, that's fear. Or I want to play AFL and I'm, you know, in the back garden, I kick every post, I'm brilliant. I know I could do it. But, you know, the moment that comes in, to me, it's fear. It's fear-based. There's a whole reams of things that sit below that, but it's fear-based. And that's what you work to. And like I said, you be tough on the problem, gentle on the person, because you need to get that out of them. What is it really you're doing? Well, my father said I'm no good at it. Or my mates just laugh at me if I tell them I want to be a singer or whatever. And I've had it with coaching. You know, I want to be a singer, but... No, I would never ask them to sing. That's not what I'm there to do. My job is to support them through to finding out why that bothers them so much and where is the root of that back to its source. And often, and psychologists will say, often it goes straight back to childhood. And I'm saying, okay, fine, yes, that's good. Now, I'm not a therapist that would sit down, a therapist, and sit there and say, right, we're going to take you right back to your childhood. That's 15 years of study and qualifications, you know. When you coach and mentor someone, you want to take them forward. So this is the line in the sand you're drawing, saying, these are your issues. Let's deal with them as identifying them and writing them and quantifying them so we know exactly what they are. So you can see them and look them in the face, right there. And then once you get that, what we're saying is now we want to get from there to here. Yeah, and these are the strategies that we're going to, you know, we work together to apply, to work to get to there. That is somebody who is suddenly realizing they're not a product of their past because we're continually living in the past. You know that, you know? The way the brain works, we're continually living in the past. The moment you sit there and say, oh, but you're in the past. You're not in the future. You're not in the present, moving to the future. You've gone right back to the past. And it's a big job when you've got a 45-minute session with somebody coaching and they're in the past. It'll take more than that to get them back to where you want them to start the session. Mm-hmm. So it's difficult. So fear is a major factor, mate. I think massive.
Do you think that fear is the thing that fundamentally holds people back from their own personal development, their own success, or the success that they actually want to achieve, becoming the greatest they can possibly be?
Yes, and I believe that everyone has the right to have a dream, you know, and everyone has a right to set their goals, and everyone has a right to build their future. Fear takes you from the release of the dopamine, which is the feel-good factor hormone, which you have when you set a good goal. So you sit back and you write down and you think, right, I'm going to do my purpose. Everything has got to come off who you are as a person, both cognitively and motivationally. The cognitive element is what do you know that's going to give you your purpose? So what do you want to do? You know, cognitively, what do you want to write it down? What are you? Motivationally are your aspirations and your dreams. So they're not linked. They are not linked directly to it, but they need to be congruent to it. They need to be in line with it. They need to be associated with it. So you do your knowledge, you write down what your purpose, you believe your purpose to be, which is a hard exercise and there's a lot to it rather than just sitting down on a bit of paper. And then secondly, of course, you start to make your goals, which are your directional finders to get you to where you want to be. Now, with your goals, if you sit there and you write a really good goal, you got a goal, you get there and it gets you, it resonates with you, you start, because your brain doesn't recognize, of course, whether it's true or false. It's working as if it's occurred. This is your dream. You're visualizing it. You can see it. You release dopamine. That's what happens. And it's exactly the same dopamine release as if it's real or as if it's fictitious. So you get that release of dopamine. Then you're happy. You're up on it. Right, I'm motivated to do this. You go into your house. You go into somewhere where you meet your mates, meet your family or whatever, and you share it with them in that stage of optimism. Mm-hmm. And they put you down. They knock you down. Well, that's ridiculous. Or you're never going to do that. What do you know about that? Automatically then, the brain, which is working from the front prefrontal cortex, which sees it and does it and releasing the dopamine, is now triggered off and working from the amygdala, which is your survival mechanism, and is reducing cortisol and all the fight or flight or freeze systems, which totally drains your tank of the motivational dopamine. So now you're flooded with cortisol, which is fear, anxiety, all the other factors, which starts to give you self-doubt, fear of taking that step, because you don't suddenly feel that you could do it when only 5 minutes ago you were right up to do it. So the brain has got a massive factor in this. For me, it plays such a big factor. And fear is often something which is ignored because people say, you know, I'm not frightened of anything. It's a macho, I'm not frightened of anything. But we all are. So we have to find out what it is we fear and make sure we identify it and work on ourselves to manage that. And it can be done.
Yeah. And the difference between you and the goals that you have or the success you want to achieve is the identity that you associate with yourself, right? Because that's what's happening, that process of shifting your values, or your values really make up your identity. So if I identify as someone who is lazy, my behaviors will then follow that, right? So whereas if I identify someone who is motivated, well, what it really is motivation other than the chemistry that's going on, that's happening, and the chemistry comes from that identity, the thoughts that we have. And that thought that I have that I am lazy or I am not capable of that, you create, that's where that chemistry comes from, right? And that is, that is your identity. And I think that's where your statement of go soft on the person but hard on the problem really allows people to start to change their identity, where if you continuously put someone down and you continuously beat them down, and that's, we can kind of tie this back to leadership. If that's what you're doing to someone, you're doing nothing than solidifying those thoughts in their head, which is going to stop them from progressing.
And what else does it do? It gives them fear because they're thinking they're being judged every time they do something. I can't mess up again. I can't. So therefore, are they going to try to the same level to get it right? They're going to try at a level where they're just not going to get it wrong. And there is a different plateau for somebody working to get it to grow and be the best they can be, or somebody who is working just not to stuff up.
It's interesting. Pat, so, you've had a lot to do with Pat, and I'm so proud of him because he has grown so much over the last 2-3 years. But when he first come on with us, and he might get a little bit embarrassed that I'm saying this, but it's a testament to him as a person. He come on and he made a mistake, and in his whole experience through life previously has been people solidifying, egotistical people who lack self-awareness, who aren't true leaders in his life, from employers and so on, were solidifying in his mind that very thing, that he was making mistakes and it's his fault and he is this and he is that. And when he first come on with us, he did make a mistake. And I knew he made the mistake, and we got on a call. And he lied, right? And in that moment, you have a choice. I could tell straight away why he was lying, and I knew straight away why he was lying. And it was like, well, hang on. And I asked him the question again. I'm like, what happened? What happened? And he told the lie, and he told the lie. And I'm like, Pat, you don't need to do this right now. And I go, at the end of the day, you made a mistake. I will make a mistake. And me and you can have conversations about that mistake that is going to allow you to make progress. And that's okay. And you're allowed to have conversations with me when I make a mistake so that I can progress. And that's the relationship we need to have. Because what matters more than anything is the fact that I can trust you and that you can trust me. I don't care if you make mistakes. I do care if I can't trust you. And it's funny, like from that very moment onwards, he has just gone to the moon, right? And we can have these conversations, but his progress, his development has only come because instead of going hard on him, we went hard on the problem. We went hard on the lie. We go, okay, well, what happened to the what was the mistake? It's not you that you're a bad person.
Yeah, get that.
And there's been other situations where I haven't done that, right? Like, there's been times where I haven't done that, and there's still times where I don't do that. But the thing that, even just on my, from my perspective, for me, is that the most important thing to me is that I understand that I haven't acted the way I want to act in that moment, and that's okay too, right? Because you have these conversations in business. You're in really, you would know this more than me, right? Because I talk about high pressure situations as being a founder and a leader of a company. Right, so it's not on the same level as being in battle or in these situations that potentially you've been in, right? But the principle is the same, right? If I, and the circumstances are very different, but the only way I can grow and not make the same mistake over and over again is if that I actually recognize that making the mistake in the first place is actually okay, right? Because I want practice, yeah? And as long as I can recognize that, I can better myself in that situation, but I can also better the people that I'm dealing with. And I think that's for me the most important thing.
Yeah, and when I used to teach, I was a member, I was a part of the team originally, and then I was training. We training people to go out and engage in firearms situations, high-level, high-risk situations. Chances are they were going to shoot somebody or they were going to be shot themselves. They were very high risk. The statistics that we were working to were those sort of levels. So one of the things I would say to them is like, we need to identify when we're in a learning environment and when we're in a performance environment. And there is a distinct difference between the two. When we're learning, even if you shoot somebody in training, it's a learning curve, because the guys would go, oh my God, I'm going to get kicked off. This is going to happen. This is going to happen. No, we've built you into that process over and over again to get you into such a state of stress that you react. Now, what are we going to do? We're going to work on it, because you won't do that in the performance arena now, because we have worked on it. The day you go to train to look good, to sound good, is the day you have got a product which is just down the pan, man. It ain't going to work. Eventually, something will challenge it, and it will not survive the challenge. You have to dedicate performance to when you're doing the job. That's where the flow comes from, being in the flow. It comes from being in the performance. I know people who do keynote speakings who will go down to the beach and practice just projecting their voice and then bringing their voice in line with the tide coming in. They will go and they will put a stone in their mouth to practice talking, to be articulate over certain words that they're trying to get out that they think are so important. This is a learning environment, purely preparing them to stand in front of 1,000 people and flow. You know what I mean? Because I'm telling you, mate, when you jump out of a van and you've got a gun in your arm and you'll put it into the face of someone, it's a split second, 100% decision on whether you shoot or don't shoot. And these guys, and these are elite athletes, these guys, we trained every day then. These were great guys, brilliant guys, and girls, but they had to have a differential between performance and learning. And when they learned, it wasn't about counting holes on a target, it was about what's the development of this. And then when we develop them, you micromanage the little elements of the job. So it might well be that we're training for a intervention. We would spend, and there's a hostage situation going on, we would spend hours practicing with tape round, going into a room and going right, going into a room, going right, going into a room, going right, going into. So it's absolutely motor memory, going in there, going in there, going in there. The Iranian embassy siege in 1982, where the Special Air Service, and I wasn't in the Special Air Service, I've not been Special Forces, the Special Air Services took on the Iranian embassy and the terrorists that were in there holding all the hostages. The moment it was handed over to the Special Air Service and they deployed, all the terrorists were killed. Not one hostage was killed from the point that the Special Forces went in. Now everyone said, oh, they must be really well trained because they just come in, they've danced down some ropes, blew up some windows, went in and shot everybody. Well, that was not what happened, of course. They were days and days and days and days of going through modeling, role modeling, priming themselves, mental priming, to get themselves into that process to do that job. And when it happened, those minutes of what took up the entire time and was shown on the world news, God, these people are the best in the world. Now, I know the guy on the balcony, and I know 2 or 3 of them. They've become very good friends of mine. And as I say, I wasn't in their regiment, but they started to do work as consultants after the event, and I got to know them. I spent time at their house, met their families. So, and I got to see them, firsthand. And so what I say is that was not something that somebody just come out and did. It was about preparation for that.
It's so interesting, right? It's like the Kobe Bryant, and they talk about him a lot, but the stories you hear about him where he's training at 4 a.m. It's the Jordan. Jordan's known for himself practicing hard, and that's what he did for his teammates. They practiced hard. They practiced like it was a game. They reframe, and he talks about that. And I think it's so important, right? Like, I think that's the difference between practice and performance. I think about it like learning. I'm an aggressive learner. Like, I'm a really aggressive learner. Like, I dedicate my mornings, every morning, 4:30, wake up. And that's what I do. I get in and I learn, because I know that it's that learning when I'm either teaching or or I get challenged on one of my ideas. And I have been. I remember one of the worst experiences of my life was sitting up in front of a crowd, and I tried to talk about something that I didn't know well, and I got called out for it. And from that day on, I said, there's never going to be a thing that I talk about ever again that I haven't relentlessly studied and actually applied. Actually used it and worked on it. And that's why the practice of something is so important. As like we talked about Al Roseby, fill your own cup. That's the filling of the cup, in my opinion. It's the practice, it's the learning, it's the development, so that when you're in the high pressure situations, you don't have that fear.
That's right. And like I said, I think I said on the last one, but I'll reiterate it this time, is that when I was in Ireland and we lost a lot of people, blown up and everything, and they all said I'd go in the bar, I remember thinking, that doesn't work for me. My way of dealing with trauma is not to go and get drunk. That's just not my way. So what can I do? So I started to learn. I started to experience, and I become qualified. I become a counsellor. Then I thought, okay, what does counselling do? That's what that will do for me. I understand that now. Well, what else can I do? NLP, what will that offer me? That will offer me this, 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 and this. I'll get qualified. Dunk. What else? Hypnosis. Got to learn about the subconscious. Everything we're doing is about the conscious and subconscious mind. Consciousness is the thing. Become a hypnotherapist. Dunk, 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 dunk. Not to run on businesses. I've never done it as a business in my life. But to understand the stuff that sits with it. During COVID, I trained to become a practitioner, then a master practitioner in neurochange method, understanding the way in which the brain functions and neuroplasticity, the fact that we're not born as we used to think, that this is what we are. We are who we are. This is our level of intelligence. This is as good as I'm going to get. Now we know that this jelly bean thing is molded. It's creating new neural pathways all the time. And once you understand that, you can say, I'm never too old to change. I'm never too old to learn. And I believe the society, man, they've got young guys, 14, 15, 16, who are crying out for role models, crying out for people to sit there and allow them to be who they can be, but they haven't got that person in their life. Now, you can't be the grandfather and the father of everyone, but what you can do is you can start to look at ways how you can get into that sort of area, You've got to be very careful. There's areas of trauma that people have been involved in that you would never know and they would never say. So it's not as straightforward as just saying, I can help you. What I mean is that sometimes when you provide a community and get the thing going where people can be who they want to be and feel comfortable in being that, then you get amazing progression. Amazing progression. And I don't believe, I think that when I first got involved in mindset and talked about it and I read all the stuff on it and I did the courses and Carol Dweck's book and the growth mindset, and where she coined that phrase, and now it's just everywhere. I still felt that's not it. This isn't mindset. This is just a part of it, because we're not two types of people out there. We're not a growth mindset, fixed mindset. They don't just come into the room and somebody says, I'm learning today and I'm going to be the best version of myself I can be, or they come in and say, you don't get that. You get people flowing through a continuum through their day of going into things where they're happy, where they're sad, where they're motivated, where they're demotivated. This is just a rolling process of mindset. It's just, and now they're coming back now. There's a continuum of mindset now they're talking about. And I'm saying, that makes sense to me. I never felt that somebody says to me, well, I've got a growth mindset. Really? In every element of your life? And I find, and so I got away from all that, and I started to look back at purpose. I sit solely in the middle. If you're looking at yourself as a human and you're saying, what drives me? It's the heart and soul of you, of your inner core, that drives you. So put that on the table. This is who I am. There's my values comes off it. This is what comes off it. This is what I'm looking for. This is the type of partner I want. This is the sort of family I want to do. That grows from it, like tentacles comes from it. But the purpose is who you are, both cognitively and motivationally. And what I'm saying on that, once you identify that, and that's not easy, that doesn't sit there just writing something on a bit of paper. It's a lot of work. And you sit there and you get that, and then you say, right, okay, how am I going to build this?
What's the gap, right?
Yeah.
Where am I and who do I want to be?
Yeah. And as I'm doing it, Kyle, as I'm going in, I'm setting up my business, or I'm going in and doing something like this, what I'm underwearing is I have a holistic modular of skills that sit around my purpose. And that includes mindset. It includes my belief system. It includes my emotional intelligence and the way I look at the world and the way I regulate the way I feel. So when something happens that takes me off my purpose, it's contradiction. It's a contradicting factor of my values. My emotional intelligence kicks in and says I don't feel good.
And can you actually understand those emotions?
There you go.
Yeah.
People, that there is a 10-week course in itself.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But teaching them in silos isn't enough. They've got to have that holistic approach. They've got to have this thing that says, first and foremost, who am I and what do I want to, what am I at my core and where am I going to go? What is this business I'm thinking about starting? I want to make widgets. I want to be the best widget maker in the world. Well, a lot of money in widgets. How can you make that do? What's going to stimulate you every day to get up and make widgets? Different to the person making them on the shop floor. But what are you as the CEO of the widget company? What is driving you? And once you found it, once you find your why, the how falls into place, because then the motivation comes from the dopamine that's gone into your system. That allows you to get ready to make those plans and strategies, which then drive the progress. The biggest thing on it, though, you got to take action. You got to take that first step, And action is very much part of that process. It's the thing that sits on it.
So if a business owner is listening to this, right, and obviously everything they've talked about, because you've worked with business owners before, and you've fundamentally seen that at the core of everything that they need to do is they need to work on themselves, right? Because that's always going to be their rate limiter, right? How do you view this from a business perspective then, right? So, because you've just, I know that you kind of just mentioned it, but for somebody listening, what are the things that they can start to do, or how do they start to look at this situation to make sure that they're progressing on a level of self, so that the rest of their company can kind of continue on?
Well, one of my roles, I was the general manager for the Northern Territory, working for the largest security company in the world, in Australia, right? I had that general manager role, right? And what I found was everyone was frightened of making a mistake, because it was all KPIs and it was all about the EBIT. I had to spend many, many, many hours every month, quantifying my sales, my return, and my EBIT. I had to spend many, 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 many hours working on ways in which I can reduce that. And there was just no enjoyment in it. There was just, who gets the benefit of this? We went away for the executive, all the general managers, went away 2 days. And all we sat and did was got hammered on everyone's EBIT. And you were ridiculed in front of everyone else about your EBIT. Now, I had Northern Territories. I was lucky, so it was quite a good one. But there were people there who were like, oh, my God, I think I'm going to lose my job. Now, once that environment is created, it becomes toxic, and it's not healthy. So my view on that would be this. Any business you're going into, you've got to have driver and markers that indicate your profit and loss, because ultimately you have to be successful. You're striving for success. But if you recruit well, if you put onus and and you put emphasis on who the people are in your business you want to bring in, and if you get that right and you spend time on that, the chances are you'll get people who will be signing up to what you're doing. And then it's all about everything else. Where and how do we quantify our success, but at the same time, understand the difference between a performance and a learning culture, understand this holistic process that's it down to manage mistakes, to manage issues, and to manage people's lives. Because at the end of the day, they come to work, but they bring all their baggage with them. And they're sat at work and they're trying their hardest to concentrate because they don't want to let anyone down, but ultimately they've got this thing going on in the back of their head which is affecting them, So this is where you get this culture from. The culture comes, for me, your culture comes out of your purpose, it comes out of your soul. What sort of company do I want to be, When I was applying for a job in America once, I was applying for a job and it was this amazing head office. It was like technical world. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. And I was looking at that, and they were all saying it's all about, we're a family. I never experienced that like that before, not in such a big company. No, I didn't actually get the job, but the fact of the matter was, I was excited about it because of the way I'd looked into it. They just didn't want to take anyone from Australia. At the end of the day, it was a guy in America got it, believe it or not. But the fact of the matter is, I was quite excited about it. And for the first time in a while about going for a job, because I was working for myself. But suddenly I thought, well, actually, this is something I wouldn't mind really doing. And I looked into what they do, and they have this infrastructure which works out of the process of their purpose. And the CEO, is as approachable and as available as is the janitor. You know what I mean? And he spends a great deal of time and effort in making sure everyone is got what they need support-wise to do what it is he's asking them to do. And he's asking them to do a lot. But they can do it. They relish the challenge because they were recruited well. They got in and done, they got everything they need and they can move forward. So my view would be simple. Recruitment is a big thing. But your purpose and your soul of your company must be clearly defined and articulated to everybody, and everyone's got to be on board. And then from there, create the environment, this holistic environment, which takes into consideration that people are going to have good and bad days. You can't bring somebody in with a growth mindset and they'll stay in that all day. They're going to be in and out of it based on life. And manage it and have the facilities to manage that. I don't mean to say you send everybody home, you do this, you do that. What I'm saying is have the facilities to give people a time to make a phone call that is critical to them, that's impacting on their work.
Create the right environment.
Yeah.
That was great. I think, there's a lot of value in that. We're going to move on to quickfire now, which is, it's short, impactful answers to questions that we think are really important, obviously based on what we're talking about. So question number 1 is one piece of advice to help people overcome fear.
Right, one piece of advice. Stop, take stock, acknowledge it, write it down. Exactly word for word what it is concerning you. Write it down, state it out, and then look for the strategies to deal with it. But the first thing is you have to acknowledge it.
Amazing. So when you say acknowledge it, right? So and I guess this is like, I know that we said quick fire, right? But it's like, how does someone acknowledge it, right? How does someone actually acknowledge fear? What's the process?
First of all, you have to take ownership of it. So the acknowledgement of it is saying, I am scared if I do this, that this is likely to happen, right? And I'm writing that down. And once I've taken it down, read it on the paper. Once you read it on a paper, my God, it's throwing up at you. And then you sit there and say, I own that. And then leave it, take stock of it. That's it, yeah? And then once you go away, you're then now thinking, how am I now going to apply some strategies to deal with that? But it's not part of the same thing. The first thing is very, very important. Stop. I'm feeling, I am feeling that if I do that, I almost feel sick. That's telling you something's not right. My emotional intelligence is telling me that my body and everything is working to a certain level, and I need to regulate that because I don't feel good about that feeling of doing that. Or if I do that, this is might happen. That worries me. That really concerns me. Stop, take stock of it, write it down, see it, read it, own it. Because it's yours then. There's no point denying it. That's what's bothering you. You ain't got to share it with anybody. You just own it. And then you take stock of then some strategies how you can overcome that.
Yeah, for sure. I think ownership is the hardest part, right? And it's very easy to...
And the reason I make an emphasis on it is because people don't want to do it.
Yeah.
You know how many people are still, you say, oh, mate, you just knocked my drink over. Just take it as a simple thing.
Yeah.
No, I didn't.
Yeah.
Own
it's
it,
definitely
man.
the hardest thing, 100%.
Own it.
I understand what, yeah, 110%. It's because it's like, that's the hardest part, right? Your ego says not to. Your ego says, I want to look good instead of actually progressing. I want to look like I can handle this.
Yeah.
I want to look like I'm crushing this, but really,
Ego's a whole different podcast.
Yeah.
But I'll just one thing on that. The thing I find, and it's not just Australia, it's everywhere. It's all around the world. But culturally, a man still, even though they're saying the concept of being a man is changing, it isn't really. It's not changing inside of the person. The person still wants to be looked at as a man, still wants to be seen as a man. And when they get together with other men, they will do men things. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That isn't going to change. Not yet. It's just, there's a few laws and things that sit around it and some comeuppance that comes back on them. But generally, that's life. So what I'm saying is, I go back to that time with the smoking. I was ridiculed as being less than them because I didn't smoke. And yet I was more than them because I didn't smoke. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Once I knew that I was more than them, I had no problem with standing there and taking the ridicule.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's obviously the hardest thing, the hardest part. So I know you were obviously trying to keep it nice and short there, but you just say what you want to say with these, all right?
Okay.
What would you tell someone who feels like they're struggling to find their purpose?
Right. The first thing the first thing I would sit down and give it a go yourself, right? Sit down and ask yourself these big questions. Who am I? Who am I first? Well, what do you mean by that, Kevin? I'm a lawyer. No, you're not a lawyer. I'm a doctor. No, you're not. I'm a cop. No, you're not. I'm an athlete. No, you're not. Who are you? Yeah, it's both a noun and a verb. A noun is, I'm a doctor. Now, if you lost your doctor's job, you wouldn't be a doctor. I'm a CEO. Well, if you lost your company, you wouldn't be a CEO. So the purpose has got to be sort of verb-driven. I inspire. I communicate. These are things that regardless of what role you take on in life, they are still your driving purpose. So it's finding what it is. Now, I say, I look at Liv and I say, she's a communicate. She wants to market and communicate. That's her thing. That's why she did what she did and everything else. So for her purpose, that would sit really strongly within her core. And for yours, you want to change things. You want to change. You want to develop. You want to inspire, lead. There's all these words. But you pick your ones that you suit. That will mean that it doesn't matter where your business goes. They are still your core purpose. Mm-hmm. And I've written a sort of a purpose statement. It's not easy to write, but I wrote one, and I sort of play with it a bit. But also the other thing is, with this course I did, they said, right, what you sit down is you write. You just don't stop writing for 2 minutes. what your purpose is. Don't stop. Don't go back and change something. Just write. At the end of it, take a 30-second break. Don't read it, 30-second break. Turn the page over, do it again for 1 minute. Stop, take a 30-second break. Don't read it, turn it over, 30 seconds. And at the end of that, I come up with one sentence of what my purpose was, taken originally from little elements of those first 2 pages, and I just cut out all the wolf, all those, the additional stuff I didn't need. But those exercises, little exercise like that, was a very good way of doing it. But it's non-stop. You mustn't stop. You've got to keep your pen moving all the time. Doesn't matter what you're writing. You could be writing dribble. I love to walk. I'd like to walk in the park. Just keep writing. In it will be your purpose. And then when you do it for a minute, a 30-second one, it cuts it all down. Then you do it for, 15 seconds or whatever. You will find you will get a sentence from it.
Yeah. Well, what's that called? That's removing... it's when you take something that's big and you cut it down and you chunk it down and you chunk it down.
Yeah.
So next question, one mistake you think people make when they set goals?
They don't believe them. They don't. They set their goals to achieve, and goals aren't achieving. That's not the outcome. The goal is merely a direction finder. It's your North Star. It's where you want to go. Technically, you should never reach your goal. You should always be growing. The secret of everything you do from your purpose through into your life should be the journey from here to there and the growth that you get within it. As long as you're growing, you are changing. And one of the best things somebody said to me once was a runner said, I started to be successful as a runner when I stopped trying to get a time at the end that would win me a medal. Once I started to concentrate on the way I was running in synchromatic stages, and started to build my little internal goals in amongst that race, I started to be successful in my mind, in my soul. Therefore, I was a winner. And ironically, what happened was his time started to improve. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's like everything. It's don't look at a goal as the outcome. This is what I want to be. I want to be a millionaire by the time I'm 19. Ah, really? Great. Then you could win the lottery and you could be a millionaire by the time you're 19. Or you might not. But if your goal is set out as a purpose-driven series of journey, then you cannot fail. You cannot lose. You're a winner all the way.
Because the journey is the goal.
Because your journey is the goal.
I love it. What's the one thing people can do to change their belief system?
Well, that's a good one, because beliefs, and that forms part of this holistic process. Limited beliefs, we know that they can be really destructive in somebody's growth. And so what I would say about belief system is, first and foremost, it's called belief because we believe it. But actually we don't believe it. We believe it internally in our mind, in our brain. So it's subconscious. So we're not actually having any control over it. So most of our beliefs are dispositional beliefs, which means that we don't give them much thought, So you sort of say, right, let me give an example. How can I give an example? Right. Somebody looks in a mirror and say, yo, I'm fat, right? That's a dispositional belief. You don't give it any thought. You look in the mirror and say, oh, I'm fat, right? I want to change, but that's who I am, right? Against a core belief, which is the belief you are giving thought to, is I visualize myself in a mirror looking good. Looking like when I look at it and I go, ding, I'm looking good. So the first part of it is to understand that is your belief system something that you're not giving any thought to, dispositional, or is it something you're concentrating on, core? If it's a core belief, then it's coming from your conscious mind. You're consciously thinking about it. Now, to change a belief, we've got to get our conscious mind to make the changes before the subconscious mind can take them in. So it's actually quite difficult to change a dispositional belief because they're usually quite deeply wired in the system. Mm-hmm. But it can happen. And it has to happen by the way the person sits down and determines what they want to change that belief to. The harder and the longer you've been doing it, smoking's a classic. Smoking is a classic. Somebody is a smoker, and they say, I want to give up smoking. So the moment they start to say, as of now, I'm not smoking, and they get that first hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, And all of a sudden, the brain, which all the brain wants to do is survive, it hates change. The brain, by definition, will not want you to do anything that changes what it considers to be its homeostatic state. So it says, but you like smoking. No, I'm not smoking. You love smoking. No, I'm not smoking. It makes you feel so good. No, I am not smoking. Hour later, 2 hours later, starting to get a bit of a craving for the cigarettes, and it's saying, you really want to. Let me just give you this one. Start tomorrow. Just have this last one and really enjoy it and start tomorrow. I'll back you all the way. So they say, won't be long, go outside and they have this one, which is their last one, this second last one, yeah? And they will start tomorrow. I'm really serious from tomorrow. But the brain has got you. It's because it doesn't want change. So it does anything in its power to trick you into not changing because it doesn't want you to change. And that's massive. It goes to everything, really, and anything, any walk of life where somebody is saying, oh, you know, I just can't seem to get motivated to do that. What you're saying to yourself is that is a dispositional belief which is so wired into your system that you haven't given it the thought or given it the attention it deserves to change.
I don't need to add too much to that. I think, one of the big rocks that I see that has come from this conversation is, the word I kind of find is like identity, right? And we all identify as something. And in order to achieve something, you need to identify as the person and embody the values and the belief systems and basically everything to achieve that certain outcome, but don't put the emphasis on the outcome. Put the emphasis on the process and make that the goal. Make the goal to be a person who can achieve those things rather than simply to achieve only those things. And that's kind of, I take so much out of this conversation. Still, we've probably had this conversation 5 million times together, but I'd still take so much from it and try to summarize it for myself so that I can still continuously progress myself. So,
You should be very proud of where you are now, because I remember you where you weren't. and the point I make here is that you were taking things on then. I knew when you were listening, when we were talking, and I knew when you talk and you went off and see over someone else and they listened to them and come back. I knew when you were taking things on. You could see it. You know what I mean? And my view on everything is this: is that everyone, if they've got a spark of something in their mind that has got a trigger of ambition, and they've got an idea of what that ambition should lead to, can make massive changes in the world. When I left the police, they gave me a Lifetime Achievement Award. Those things ain't given away. I got this Lifetime Achievement. I go to London, I was on a stage and everything else. And I sat there and I got this award and I thought, what does this mean now? Where is it now? Does it mean it now? But I had several awards like that where I stand up and do a speech and all this sort of stuff. And I sit there and I think, what does that mean? And I take away from it the fact that I impacted on some. I wasn't an entrepreneur, but within an organization like the government, I saw a program last night called Angela Black. It's a program, yeah? Within it, a British cop turned up at a door to help with this domestic violence situation. He was wearing equipment on his belt I designed. And is still worn to this day by British cops all around the country. So I look at it and I think, my purpose was very clear to me. I was put in those situations to be able to stand up to talk to members of parliament, governments, about the need to bring Taser in, to do this, with the groups that worked as well. I wasn't on my own, by the way. It was always groups. But the point I'm making is that was what happened to me. And I step back over it. And so when I sit in front of somebody, it doesn't matter who it is, whether it be you, whether it be somebody I meet on a bloody coffee shop. And the other day there was a 66-year-old guy who just wouldn't leave me. He was like sat with me for a coffee. I didn't know him. He was just sat at the next table and we just got chatting. He was there for about an hour and a half. I couldn't get away because he was just so regretful of his life, of the areas of his life he hadn't done anything for. And he says, and I now look back and I regret that. And I said, well, don't regret it, because they have given you, you've sat here now as a wise man. You haven't failed anything. You know, you look at yourself as a failure, and he isn't. But the point of the matter is, there's no one to tell him that. And there's no one to tell a lot of people simple things, or to allow them to talk and listen. And then ask them at the end of that, what were you saying? And then talk it back to you and say, you've answered your own question there. You've created your own solution. Because once you start putting it down on paper, or you start thinking it through, clarity comes, you know. That's why we have mindfulness. That's why we have meditation. You know, like I've gone down that road with you before. I've said, in the 70s, if I'd have gone into the elite firearms unit and said, right, everyone's going to meditate, I'd have been hung out of a window upside down by my ankles.
Yeah.
I would have. And yet I was trying to, I was going out, and I was putting people in situations in learning mode where they were going to get shot by a rubber bullet, by a plastic bullet, by a blue bullet, to simulate to them that they got that exercise wrong, and they need to know that. And they, you know, after they left, they'd sit down, and I was almost sacked. They were all got together, and they wanted. I stood very firm by the fact that one day they will be better for that experience. I didn't feel I had to explain it to them. I just felt that they were going to be better for it. They're still now they're like my best mates. We're still in touch this day. And they also said to me on numerous occasions, you made training come alive. You made it happen for us. We always enjoyed it. But they didn't enjoy it when they were pushed to the point where they got it wrong. But once you understand that this is what this is about, your learning mode is about getting it wrong, and then sitting down, debriefing it, learning it, doing it again. Then that ego, the ego never comes to the front of the brain, doesn't come out. It gets pushed right back in, and they sit down, they settle. Unfortunately, I didn't know that then. I didn't know that. I didn't prepare them for it. And I took the stick for it. But I've taken the stick for a lot of things in my life, mate.
Yeah. I think, you know, to wrap it all up, I think, you know, one thing that, based on what you just mentioned there, is, you know, you said that I should be proud. And I think one thing that I always hold with me is that I am. Right. Yeah. And I'm not talking from experience where you go through tougher times, getting to this point where you can be proud of your achievements, and the person, more so the person you've become. One thing I can say is, looking back, is I'm proud of the moments where it was tough and it was hard to change, and you have to give up relationships and friendships, and you have to dig deep, and you have to, you know, all the tough times. That's why you should take action on who you want to be in life, because it's when you look back in retrospect, that's when you can actually be proud on those moments. Not the moments when it was going well, and not the moments where things were easy, but actually the times when things were tough and you knew who you wanted to be and what you wanted to do.
I mean, I thank my family from the bottom of my heart. They're dead now. They're all dead, except my brother and sister, of course, but they're dead. That I was put in those situations where I had to deal with that. You know what I'm saying? And I, to this day, I say, and everyone said to me, "Oh, that must have been really hard." It wasn't hard. All I can remember is laughing. I can just remember just finding my place where I needed to be, even with the guys who I knew were going off and doing the things that I didn't want to do. I knew that they were characters. They were funny. But I had even then I had the self-awareness to say, not go. And after a while, they stopped asking. There was no big drama where they were going to kill me on in this. In my time, I've had a few people who wanted to put me out of the game, mate. But in this, I don't think of that as anything other than a growing and a learning experience. I was in my learning mode then. Yeah. You know what I mean?
100%. All right. A lot of value, a massive conversation. I want to say a big thanks to you, Kev. We got there eventually after some technical issues. Disco, Johnny Boy, I put him under the pump today and put a lot of pressure on him. So I'm really appreciative of yourself as well, getting the job done, even though I made it extremely hard for you. And obviously to all the listeners as well. We're getting a lot of support right now. So I'm super grateful. I honestly can't say... I'm just so grateful for the support that we're getting right now. So a big thanks to you guys. And I really hoped you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you next week. Thanks again, Kev.
Thank you.
Hey guys, so as we end today's podcast, I wanted to say a massive thank you to you. You've made it to the end, so you've tuned into the whole episode, which is something that we're extremely grateful for. If you're new to the podcast, hitting the subscribe button is really, really important to us because it really helps us out a lot. The more subscribers we get, the more, the bigger the community we build, the more that we can progress with our vision, and the more that we can start to expand and keep having, these amazing conversations. So we're really thankful. And one thing that we're also really thankful for, which, has been a big driver for me personally with the podcast, is just the messages that we get on the Instagram. I still go through the Instagram and like to have conversations with people that are engaging with us. It means so much, and it's great to hear the stories of people progressing and learning and how we're impacting you, the listener. So that's something we're really appreciative of. And I actually want to go through and actually mention some people who we had some great conversations with on our social media. These people reached out. So Alicia Pyers, it was great chatting with you, and I'm super appreciative for you reaching out to the Instagram. And it's great to hear your story and what's inspiring you and the changes that you're making. And also Jess Dinning. Jess was lucky enough to talk to you last week, and that was really, really amazing. And just the same thing goes. The conversations that we have with you guys, it's crazy how much of an impact it makes on us as a company and what we're striving to do. So a massive thank you to you two and everybody else who's reaching out and sharing and doing those things. But the two things that you can do that will help us the most is make sure that you're subscribed, and a big thanks to everyone who's leaving reviews as well, because that shows people that this is a safe space for them to come and listen and learn, and that's really the most important things to us. Really hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and we will see you next week.